Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. This afternoon, I would like to actually speak on Ruth chapter 1, covering some 17 verses with regards to a very familiar story of Ruth and Naomi. Uh, and allow me to paint a picture of the background. And the background that I have set out to do is actually the first 15 verses because I want to concentrate on 16 and 17 as our core for this afternoon. And so, out of the first 15 verses, I think what is interesting to note is that the background is set at a time of the judges. It is at a time where it was before the kings, and particularly before King Saul, and there was famine in the land. And typically, when famine happens, we're told in the Hebrew text that very much there is nothing much to eat, and the staples they have is not rice. They plant wheat and barley, and these kinds of agriculture was impacted. And in this impact, the way that the story builds itself up was that this certain man of Bethlehem decided to move his entire family to the neighboring country of Moab, both he, his wife, and his two sons. And we're told the names as the casts that's been built in this story was Elimelech, which was the man who moved his family. And it appears that he was a fairly rich person as well as we go through the entire book of Ruth. But he decided not to stay, and he moved his wife, Naomi, and his two sons, Mahlon and Kilion. And they were fairly younger sons, and they were described as Ephratites of Bethlehem, and something which we're probably not terribly familiar because Ephratite is actually a word that is the other name of Bethlehem, meaning Ephratah. And so these were people from Ephrata, and perhaps being named that way, they were the more noble of the people there, people who have more land, more servants, or richer. But nevertheless, he decided, for whatever the reason, that there was nothing that he could plant in that period of time, and he moved everybody to Moab, a very unusual, but not unheard of, because we have seen this in the book of Genesis, where Jacob moved his entire family to Egypt because of the famine. And so Elimelech was following suit, I guess, and moved his family to Moab. And he remained there, and the story tells us that he died. And the story now focuses on a woman, Naomi, and her two sons. After the father died, the two sons took wives. One was Orpah, and the other was Ruth. And thereby the story develops for about 10 years. And then the children, the sons died. And it's a very sad story to begin with. Uh, Three deaths out of all these things. And so Naomi survived her two sons and her husband. And the story now narrows down on Naomi. Now, the interesting thing is this, that as the story develops itself, she decided, out of whatever she has heard when she was in Moab, that God, Jehovah, has visited the people. Now, God visits people in two ways, either one with judgment or two with blessing. And in this case, the news that she had picked up while she was in Moab was that Israel is fine now. There is bread, which means wheat, is now grown. And as agriculture comes back, she decided now to move back to Israel. And when she moves back to Israel, times are not the same because there are no more men in their lives. Elimelech has died. Mahlon and Kilion also died. And so it's now the story of a widow and of widows, perhaps, both Naomi and Orpah and Ruth. And she decided to tell the young women, why don't you go back home, go back to your mother's tent. Uh, Interestingly, the culture of that time was that the tent was governed by the woman. And we read that in Genesis when uh, Isaac, when he met Rebecca, and he went into the mother's tent. And so all this description of the mother's tent really tells us that the mother really takes care of the family. And so for the women to go back to be taken care of by the mother as well. And she had only good words of blessing. It says, the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. Which means that these two women have been very good wives of both her sons, including herself, Naomi, as a mother in law. And this gives us a very good feel of how close a relationship, even though they were Moabite women, they were close with each other, and she only had good words. The Lord grant you rest in each house of her husband, and only words of blessing. And so they were supposed to part ways, and they wept. That really tells us that they had a very good and intimate relationship. That they were not like modern day in laws, where they can't live with their in laws. In this particular instance, they lived very well with Naomi. And so surely we will return with you to your people. And the two women suggested that why don't we just follow you back? But Naomi thought differently. Naomi had decided that it wouldn't be fair to them. And 11 to 15 is the last part of this introduction. 11 to 15 tells us that it is important for them to go back because she would not be having children anymore. Now, this may have caught us unawares. Why would Naomi say that? Because in Deuteronomy chapter 25, in the Torah that Naomi holds on to, is that it allows for the brothers of the dead elder brothers to for their widows to marry the children so that the younger ones can carry on the tradition and the name of the older brothers, particularly the oldest brother. And and that was not possible. Now, we may not like and appreciate that kind of a custom, but Deuteronomy 25 gives us that view. And obviously, Genesis 38 in the story of Tamar and the younger sons of Judah gave us that flavor. And as a conclusion to this introduction, Naomi says, no, not going to happen, and just go back and have your life. Naomi was a very understanding woman, and she wanted the young widows to go ahead and have their own lives. And with that, we begin to see the narrative narrow down to two women. Orpah went back. And so when you see Orpah going back, uh, you would probably think that Ruth will also go back. And Ruth said she clung to her. The idea of clinging here is very similar to the aspect of Genesis chapter 2, where God says, and a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. And that's the word cleave. That relationship is one where the man and woman depend on each other in that new life. And this word here tells us that Ruth decided that she would cling on to Naomi because that would be the relationship she honors. that Naomi is a mother to her, and she would be a daughter to Naomi, and both will have company. But Naomi says, look, your other sister-in-law has gone back to her people, the Moabites, and to her gods, the ones that they were familiar with, and that would be their people. And so why don't you go after her? But Ruth said something else, and that would be our core for this afternoon. These last two verses gives us our main theme for today. The build up to verses 16 and 17 shows us the first Jewish, or I'll use the word Jewish because that's how we use the word, but a Moabitess in Ruth, having married an Israelite or a Judahite, a Jew, because Elimelech and Mahlon and Kilion, they're all from Bethlehem, and Bethlehem is in Judah, and they are all Jews in that sense, descendants of Judah. And in Ruth, we find a very unusual response to the overtures of Naomi. Naomi meant well, young woman having lost her husband, to go back and start her life again. Orpah did that, but Ruth came out with these two verses of statements that we will want to examine because it shows that she moves from her Moabite background to one that is enjoined with Naomi. And we have always glossed over these words, but they are words of commitment. They are words that are not flippantly expressed. That is important to us today. These are words that comes from the heart of Ruth, and that's what we want to examine. The first thing that Ruth says, don't tell me to leave you, because I have decided to stay with you. Don't tell me to turn back from following after you. And this word turn back is the Hebrew word shuv, meaning she is a Moabite. She is now with Naomi, and Naomi is going back to Israel. And Naomi is telling Ruth, now you turn back and go back to where you come from. And that would be Moab. Ruth has decided that she will follow Naomi. But in what sense of the word? How can a Moabite woman join up with an Israelite woman, a Jew in this case, one from Bethlehem, Ephratah, from the descendants of Judah? Look at her statements. They are very striking. They are very committed. They are not casual. They are speaking of her heart and soul to be committed to Naomi, and in a commitment which we are not familiar with. And so if you think of it this way, Moabite are people without the Torah. Naomi, a Jew, an Israelite, of a nation which is holy before God, with the law of God, and with all these governance of God, the Moabites were asking to join her. And hence we would see in these two verses what Ruth actually meant with regards to joining Naomi, an Israelite. And in this case, in a very well understood statement, if you see it from the viewpoint of Naomi. So if you take a look at what she says, wherever you go, I will go. I ask us not to look at these statements from a Western view or a story, fairy tale from a Western viewpoint. There are places that Naomi cannot go. There are places where the law governs, where on certain days she can only do certain things and go certain places or not go certain places. And in this case, wherever you go, I will go, is a testimony of Ruth saying that I know what your laws are, the laws of God, the laws of your God, that if you are restricted, I will be too. And so wherever you are, I will follow you because you are my life example of this joining in to your faith. And that is what it means. Whatever the Torah allows you to go, I will follow. The second statement, wherever you stay, I will stay. As a single woman, as a widow, there are places where they can't be. And so that will also tell you that she is very well versed with what she is getting into. Not a casual commitment. She knows her place as a single woman, that in the land of Israel, there are certain restrictions. And so wherever you can stay, I will stay. Wherever you can't, I won't. Your people shall be my people. The people of Naomi are the Israelites, are called the nation of Israel. Nothing to do with Moab. But we need to understand Moab is related to Israel. Israel is another name for Jacob. And Jacob is the grandson of Abraham. Abraham had a nephew, Lot. And Lot had two sons with his daughters. And the two sons is Moab and Ammon. And Moab is this same Moab. The descendants of Moab are the Moabites, of which Ruth is a part of. So they were related, but they're not the same. Then Ruth knows very well the nation of Israel under the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob after leaving Egypt is a covenantal people of God in Exodus 19 as a holy nation. And she is going to join them as a holy nation. But can a Moabite join Israel as a holy nation? She knows that Israel is a holy nation. And she's joining her people, Naomi's people, as a stranger. Now in Exodus chapter 12, tells us very plainly, the people who are living with them, the Ger, the stranger, will also observe the same laws. And most of the laws are applicable to a person like Ruth, but not every one of them, because there are certain rituals that are not available to her. But by and large, the laws of God applies to her as well. And as a holy nation, she is prepared to be one, and that is what she is getting herself into. Does she know that? In my mind, absolutely. She knows this God of Naomi, which means that Naomi has revealed a lot to Ruth for Ruth to say this. And obviously, your God is my God, not the Moabite gods at all. And what does it mean, your God, my God? Naomi's God is Jehovah. And in Exodus chapter 20, very clearly tells us that this is the God that took them out of Egypt, and they shall have no other gods before me, no idolatry, and only God. And he is a Kana God. He is a jealous God. And only he and he alone shall you serve. And Ruth abandons whatever is in Moab and embraces this Jehovah God who boldly took them out with a mighty hand out of Egypt and is now living next door to Moab. Although Naomi went to Moab, she's going back to where her God has led them. And Ruth is now saying, I am joining you to become one of you, although I cannot be Israelite in that sense. I'm a friend of Israel. I am a stranger in Israel, and your laws that governs the stranger, will also govern me and will take care of me. And so your God shall be my God. And Ruth is very clear about that. And the final one, where you die, there I will be buried. Is that whatever laws apply to you, even in laws that is of a penalty, it doesn't matter. Because when you know the God of Naomi, this is in a total submission. And so what I wanted to show you is that it is very interesting that she knows God in a way where we normally have glossed over. I want us to be absolutely clear that Ruth is not a casual confession. Ruth knows what she's getting into. Number one, she knows Naomi. And in that life, Naomi must have shown her a testimony of a faithful God in a faithful life. Number two, Ruth knows Naomi's people. Even though Ruth was in Moab, Ruth knows what Naomi has conveyed, her people, her God, her laws, and how Naomi lived as an Israelite. Naomi never changed, even though she was in Moab. And that must have impacted Ruth. And number three, Ruth knows Naomi's faithfulness to God, so that Ruth knows that following Naomi is the best thing in life. And whatever has happened to Naomi, her God will take care of her. Now, in that sense, you would find that this is not a temporary arrangement of convenience. This is a life understanding of Naomi. And I would ask us to have a perspective that the life of Naomi was so impactful that it changed Ruth's perspective of life. And with this, I leave you to ponder over the significance of Ruth chapter 1 to 17, that the knowledge and understanding of Ruth about Naomi's life, about the God of Naomi, about the people of Naomi, about the laws of God in the life of Naomi, and about the faithfulness of Naomi changed. And that was the significant impact. And so, to those of us who know God, uh, how would our lives impact the people around us? And may we be like Naomi. And may we also be like Ruth, to be very knowledgeable and know deep in us who our God is. And may God bless us in this short passage.